Holmes, your host and founder of Homeowners for Justice and also producer of The Daily Show. Thank you so much for joining us. And today I feel impelled to explain to you a little bit about myself and show you how I'm viewing what we're doing. Turns out that I'm a jigsaw puzzle person. I enjoy creating jigsaw puzzles. And the fact of the matter is, I'm now doing this puzzle. Does not have a picture. So I'm putting it together blind. I don't know what the picture is going to look like. As I put the pieces together, the picture comes alive. And I have found this a really interesting example of what we're facing and why we're facing it. So as you'll notice, what we do when you don't have a picture, it's just natural and logical. The very first thing you do in putting a puzzle together is to pull out the edge pieces. What are the edges? What's that frame going to look like? And then various stacks of colors. And that's what I've done with this so far. And you notice there's still a lot of pieces in the puzzle. We're still putting the pieces together. But I want you to start to see the picture that I see forming, because it's very tyrannical. And you know, I don't make this stuff up. I document what I'm sharing. That's why all of these comments get really long, because I put all the links in the comment sections of each of the shows. So don't trust what I say. Don't trust my interpretation. Read it for yourself. Watch these videos for yourself. You make your own determination and share with others. These are some of the facts that we're facing. So today, I've already emailed most of you. You probably are aware that we're talking about tyranny, because we are facing an incredible amount of tyranny. And I'm going to explain to you exactly why. We've gotten some excellent links from our followers, and I thank you again so very much for sharing this with everybody so that we can get this out. This is what the people need to see. So let me just briefly point out that one of the major tyrannies that we're facing is the presidential dictatorship. And then the home foreclosures that we're facing, that we've been fighting, absolutely tyrannical. And it's a part of the picture, but I keep telling you, it's just a part. We need to see the whole picture, then we can better advance the cause, both to save our homes, to get better food, to save our foods, to keep out of martial law, to save the air that we're breathing, to stop the impurities that are being sprayed, to make sure that we still have freedom of movement in this country, to protect our savings, to actually protect our water, make sure that our water, air, and food are actually going to support life rather than hinder life as we know it. And it's all about the money. It is all about the money. This is the only way that these tyrannies could happen. So I wanted you to get an idea that I marched against Monsanto on Saturday. You probably did too. And the issue is, it's a different issue, but it's the same issue. It's all the same issue. And notice how the presidential dictatorship, when it expands and becomes official, the law of this land, all the other tyrannies will fit into place. One of the biggest questions I've had personally is, why are you and I having such a problem getting our Justice Department to work? Why, when we've got proof of fraud, are we struggling and fighting to just get anyone to listen to us? It's outrageous. And it didn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense until you see the big picture. And that's what I'm bringing to you today. So the fact is, today we're going to be talking about the tyranny within our country. The presidential dictatorship is in reach. It is in reach. Where there are 8 other specific tyrannies, we've just looked at them. And there are things we can do to fight back and protect ourselves, because that's number one. Number one is saving ourselves, okay? We have to stay alive. If we're not alive, then, I'm sorry, but more or less the home doesn't matter. Neither does the air and the water and the food. And if we're not alive, then we can't help and save our family, friends, and neighbors. So this is why I want to put the foreclosure process, the fraudulent foreclosures, within a framework. Now, I still believe that this is a very potent and powerful way we might be able to stop this tyranny. But we have to understand, you have to remember that this is federal. So any state grand juries, any state efforts, any petitions at the Congress, steps of the Congress, that's moot. That's just an exercise in futility. We need potent and powerful solutions. That's why I keep hounding on it and harping on it. So the very first thing I want to share with you is the commitment to fight against tyranny. And I sent that out to you guys yesterday. This was the link of the article, and I want to just read a brief paragraph from it. Because today we suffer under a government that believes it has no limits on its power. And you can see evidence of this everywhere. There's no need to follow any law. Duh. We have the Department of Justice breaking the law all the time. We find it almost impossible to get our attorney generals to pay any attention to us. Duh. The IRS is used to intimidate political enemies. The DOJ is used to intimidate the free press. The DOJ refuses to prosecute criminal fraud. The FDA is used to threaten and intimidate natural product companies that offer real, safe, and effective treatments and cures against the very chronic disease that's destroying the health of our population. We're living under a tyranny that is unacceptable, and we, the people, are determined to restore the republic and sufficiently limit the role of government down to its constitutional size and scope. Then, only then can we be a free people. And that's why I talk about things like constitutional conventions, statewide grand juries, what the state laws being passed to stop Agenda 21, whether that will take effect or not, or be of any use or not, no one knows for sure. We can keep trying. But this is the point. Only then, only when we fight back this tyranny, will we know that we are safe in our homes, our farms, and our jobs, safe from government kidnappings, surveillance, and armed raids on the innocent. And, oh yeah, whistleblowers thrown in prison. Things like that. Listen to Rachel Maddow. Now, I want to point out, and sometimes when I'm going to show some of these videos, I'm going to stop them. I'm going to talk about them right then, because you need to hear these points that are being made and recognize the pieces of the puzzle that are coming out. We have almost all the pieces. We just haven't quite hooked them all together yet. And that's what I hope to do today for you and for me and for this nation. Now, I want to make you notice this was uploaded on January 22, 2011. 11. That's over almost 2.5 years ago. Listen to Rachel.
But we begin tonight with a tale of two speeches, both from the same man, both from President Obama. One speech that could have been billed as a ballad to the Constitution, a proclamation of American values, a repudiation of the lawless behavior of the last presidential administration, and another speech announcing a radical new claim of presidential power that is not afforded by the Constitution and that has never been attempted in American history, even by George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Remarkably, President Obama today made both of those speeches simultaneously. Standing inside the National Archives in front of the actual original Constitution, President Obama delivered a blistering critique of the Bush administration, in which he called their actions and their legacy literally a mess.
Our government made a series of hasty decisions. Poorly planned, haphazard approach. Too often, we set those principles aside as luxuries that we could no longer afford. Our government made decisions based on fear rather than foresight. The decisions that were made over the last 8 years established an ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism that was neither effective nor sustainable.
An ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism that was neither effective nor sustainable. Ouch. Then, moments later, he announced his own ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism. President Obama today proposed something new, something called prolonged detention. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Prolonged detention. Did you ever see the movie Minority Report? It was based on a Philip K. Dick short story. Came out in 2002. It starred Tom Cruise, remember? He played a police officer in something called the Department of Pre-Crime. Pre-crime is where people are arrested and incarcerated to prevent crimes that they have not yet committed.
Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubinos. Take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours 4 minutes.
No, I didn't do anything.
You didn't do anything, but you're gonna. Future murder. Creepy, right? Putting somebody in jail not for what they've done, but for what you're very sure they're going to do?
There may be a number of people who cannot be prosecuted for past crimes. In some cases because evidence may be tainted, but who nonetheless pose a threat to the security of the United States.
We're not prosecuting them for past crimes, but we need to keep them in prison because of our expectation of their future crimes.
Al-Qaeda terrorists and their affiliates are at war with the United States, and those that we capture, like other prisoners of war, must be prevented from attacking us again.
Prevented. We will incarcerate people preventively. Preventive incarceration. Indefinite detention without trial. That's what this is. That's what President Obama proposed today, if you strip away the euphemisms. One civil liberties advocate told the New York Times today, quote, "We've known this was on the horizon for many years, but we were able to hold it off with George Bush. The idea that we might find ourselves fighting with the Obama administration over these powers is really stunning." And it is stunning, particularly to hear President Obama claim the power to keep people in prison indefinitely with no charges against them, no conviction, no sentence, just imprisonment. It's particularly stunning to hear him make that claim in the middle of a speech that was all about the rule of law.
But we must do so with an abiding confidence in the rule of law. Our government was defending positions that undermine the rule of law to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law.
How can a president speak the kind of poetry that President Obama does about the rule of law and call for the power to indefinitely, preventively imprison people because they might commit crimes in the future? How can those two things coexist in the same man, even in the same speech? Well, that brings us to the self-consciously awkward, embarrassing part of this speech today. After condemning the Bush administration for what he called their ad hoc legal strategy for trying to make things seem legal that patently weren't, this is what President Obama proposed.
My administration has begun to reshape the standards that apply to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law. We must have clear, defensible, and lawful standards for those who fall into this category. We must have a thorough process of periodic review so that any prolonged detention is carefully evaluated and justified. Our goal is to construct a legitimate legal framework for the remaining Guantanamo detainees that cannot be transferred. Our goal is not to avoid a legitimate legal framework. In our constitutional system, prolonged detention should not be the decision of any one man. If and when we determine that the United States must hold individuals to keep them from carrying out an act of war, we will do so within a system that involves judicial and congressional oversight. And so going forward, my administration will work with Congress to develop an appropriate legal regime so that our efforts are consistent with our values and our Constitution.
You'll construct a legal regime to make indefinite detention legal. You will what does he say? Develop an appropriate legal regime. So you can construct a whole new system outside the courts, even outside the military commissions, so that you can indefinitely imprison people without charges. And you'll build that system from scratch. What's that somebody said about ad hoc legal strategies? Just for context here, in the United Kingdom, where there isn't even a Bill of Rights, there's been a major debate about whether people can be held in preventive detention. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair wanted 3 months to be the outer limit for how long anyone could be held. There was a big political fight about it. Parliament ended up limiting that power to 28 days. 28 days is still the longest period of preventive detention that's allowed under law in any comparable democracy anywhere in the world. How long would President Obama's proposed preventive indefinite detention last? Well, he's not saying yet, but here's how he defines the threat that he says makes indefinite detention necessary.
Right now in distant training camps and in crowded cities, there are people plotting to take American lives. That will be the case a year from now, 5 years from now, and in all probability 10 years from now.
10 years from now. So you could get arrested today and locked up without a trial, without being convicted, without being sentenced for, say, 10 years until the threat of your future criminal behavior passes. Prolonged detention, he's calling it. This was a beautiful speech from President Obama today with patriotic, moving, even poetic language about the rule of law and the Constitution, and one of the most radical proposals for defying the Constitution that we have ever heard made to the American people.
I'm telling you, this is dramatic. Let's look at what Obama has done since 2011. This is the presidential dictatorship is now in reach for Obama. He can do this anytime he wants to. Anytime the bank cartel is ready and gives the signal, he will do this. Here is what the legal framework that has been set up in this country for this dictatorship tyranny. In 2001, under Bush, the National Emergency Act and the Patriot Act, which provides for an indefinite state of emergency to fight terror, and these acts are renewed annually. Here's the National Emergency Acts. I'm going to have all the links for you in the comments. Here's the Patriot Act. In 2007, the National Defense Authorization Act was passed, which determines the budget, defense budget and the funding levels. In 2010, the Presidential Decision Directive 51. It's an executive order. What that means is Obama made it up, passed it, signed it. There's no voting. He just issued this, and Congress has let him get away with it. So when you have now an executive branch that can just make up these laws and directives, and no one is stopping him, our elected officials have been bought off and are in collusion with the bankster cartel, we the people are facing this tyranny. I want you to understand that. This is massive and major, and no one is talking about it. Last night on Fox News, O'Reilly was saying that the biggest problem facing the United States is the people. And I would have to say, no. The biggest problem facing the people in the United States is this dictatorship tyranny that's just around the corner. You mark my words. This is the plan. Look at how they've put these things in place. So here's the presidential PDD, Presidential Directive 51, and new executive order which give Obama dictator power, passed in 2010. Over 3 years ago. They're planning this, guys. This is the plan. I'm telling you the plan. Pass it around. Share it with everybody. This is the scarier than I want to think about plan. But we have to take off our rose-colored glasses and we have to see the puzzle. This is the outline of the puzzle. This is going to be the borders. And then, of course, another presidential directive, executive order, for the National Defense Resources Preparedness Act. And in this order, the president assumes authority to control at the minimum, the things I've listed, and I just listed those because that would fit on the slide. You must read this, but it'll be food, energy, transportation, water, livestock, farm equipment, our health resources, construction materials. They're going to decide who lives and who dies. They're going to be able under this to come and take everything you've got, boot you out under the bridge. Who cares about whether you own the home legally or not? Who's going to stop them? This is the point. Here's the executive order, National Defense Resources, released March 16, 2012, 1 year ago. They've got the plan in place. Now, you say, why isn't the media talking about it? Not only did we talk last week about the 6 major corporations that control 90% of the media, you gotta see this. The fact is, the people in powerful positions are interconnected. It's a small group of interconnected entities. Often, well, you're looking, they're married, they're brothers, they're siblings. You've got the news media over here, and you've got the White House over here. It just is the way it is, and this is the battle we're fighting. We're fighting the tyranny, and we're fighting the black hole that the media is putting that tyranny in. I recommend that you send this live stream link, or at least Rachel Maddow's link, send whatever you can to whomever you can, every media outlet. They need to understand how they're being used. And this is what they need to see. I'll be there in just a minute. First, before that, I just wanted to show you, remember last week we talked about Karen Hudis? She's the World Bank whistleblower who is talking about all the fraudulent accounting at the World Bank and saying, we've got this huge problem going on. And so, of course, our Attorney General, Eric Holder, got her arrested. We arrest whistleblowers, and we're going to cover up lawlessness and criminal behavior. So this is why on each one of these tyranny fronts, everyone is struggling. There's these huge marches against Monsanto. The scientists of the world are begging to stop GMOs. The, chemtrails, air, our water, our food, our homes, our lives, and nobody is listening. And it's because our system is corrupt from within. It's tyranny from within. And we need to understand that. Now, here's a nice encouraging poll. So we're polling the people, and the people say the federal government's too powerful. Well, so what are you going to do about it? And that's why I keep pressuring and pushing for some national solution, at least state by state by state. Even then it's 50 states. What can we do to push the federal government tyranny back? And I'm telling you, they've already passed the laws and the executive orders. So it occurs to me right now that we need to have those executive orders retracted. How do we do that? I don't even know. But this is the point. That's why I'm sharing with you these pieces of the puzzle. I see the puzzle. We need to look at it carefully. Here's the puzzle. We've talked about presidential dictatorship. And then here's all the other tyrannies we're going to cover in a minute. But before that, you've got to see this YouTube video from a communist. He escaped. He came over to this country so that he could have freedom. And this video was shot. This was taken in 1985. So this was taken decades ago. And this was uploaded in 2010, 3 years ago in April. So listen with that in mind. Listen to what he's telling us. Things will be a lot clearer for you, I swear. They certainly were for me. It helped me put the outline border together on this puzzle.
Most of the activity.
before he talks, he started, but I want to emphasize the 4 stages of a communist takeover. Demoralization, demoralize the populace. Basically brainwash them. Set up a crisis. Use the crisis to get new powers. And then have a period of normalization afterward. It's basically turn up the heat on the frogs in the pot. And then they go, whoa, oh, okay, well that was just a hiccup. And then destabilize. They've already figured it out. You're going to hear him talk about how they've done this in country after country after country. They know exactly how to do it. And this guy had been trained by the KGB. So he's telling us the insider plan. We now know the plan, so listen up.
The activity of that department was to compile huge volume of information on individuals who were instrumental in creating public opinion. Publishers, editors, journalists, actors, educationalists, professors of political science, members of parliament.
Notice, this is whom they recruit. People who can influence mass public perception. People who are bold-faced liars with big egos and no morals. That's a perfect description of psychopaths. Remember? We've been talking about psychopaths. They target them. They find them. They're all over at all levels in our society. This is who they target to use. These are the voices that they promote. Make sure that these people succeed and get into the levels where they can influence mass perception.
Representatives of business circles. This was my instruction. Try to get into large circulation, established conservative media. Reach, filthy rich movie makers, intellectuals, so-called academic circles. Cynical, egocentric people who can look into your eyes with angelic expression and tell you a lie. These are the most recruitable people, people who lack moral principles, who are either too greedy or too suffer from self-importance. They feel that they matter a lot. These are the people who KGB wanted very much to recruit. Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. Are
you listening? He said this is overt. You can see it happening. And his interview was in '85. Obviously the person put this together with these pictures. They uploaded this in 2010. It is not hidden. It's overt. You can see it. And so the issue is, are we going to believe our lie in the eyes? When are we going to get awake? This is the point.
You have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. It's a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages.
Demoralization, which is the first stage, takes 15 to 20 years. This interview, remember, was in '85, and listen to what he says in 1985 when he defected and came over to the U.S. about this stage.
The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed.
It's completed. In 1985, it was completed. Stage 1.
The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. Exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom.
Did you hear that? This is why it's so hard to wake the people. They refuse to believe their eyes. They won't, and he's telling us that this is exactly what we expect. This is exactly how they demoralize and take over a country from within. This is why we're facing the difficulty we're facing with the people.
When a military boot crashes then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. Basically, America is stuck with demoralization, and unless, even if you start right now, here, this minute, you start educating new generation of Americans, it will still take you 15 to 20 years to turn the tide of ideological perception of reality. People who think they are living at a peacetime. False. United States is in the state of war. Undeclared total war.
We are in a state of war, guys. Undeclared total war. That's why we're having the difficulties we have. That's why there's tyranny everywhere.
The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. He will go to Moscow to kiss the bottoms of new generation of Soviet assassins, never mind. He will create false illusions that the situation is under control. Situation is not under control. Situation is disgustingly out.
He said this in 1985. Remember, all of these pictures we're seeing are after his interview.
Out of control. After crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. In the small town of Hue in South Vietnam, several thousands of Vietnamese were executed in one night when the city was captured by Viet Cong for only 2 days. And American CIA could never figure out how could possibly communists know each individual where he lives, where to get him, and would be arrested in one night, basically in some 4 hours before dawn, put on a van, taken out of the city limits and shot. The answer is very simple. Long before communists occupied the city, there was extensive network of informers, local Vietnamese citizens, who knew absolutely everything about people who are instrumental in public opinion, including barbers and taxi drivers. Everyone who was sympathetic to the United States was executed. Same thing was done under the guidance of the Soviet embassy in Hanoi, and same thing I was doing in New Delhi. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. It happened in Grenada. Same happened in Afghanistan. Same happened in Bangladesh. But it's the same pattern everywhere. The moment they serve their purpose, all the useful idiots are either be executed entirely, all the idealistically minded Marxists, or exiled or put in prisons, like in Cuba. Many former Marxists are in Cuba. Because, you see, the useful idiots, the leftists who are idealistically believing in the beauty of Soviet socialist or communist or whatever system, When they get disillusioned, they become the worst enemies. That's why my KGB instructors specifically made a point: never bother with leftists. Forget about these political prostitutes. The psychological shock when they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people. And the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people. They will join the links of dissenters, dissidents. Unlike in present United States, there will be no place for dissent in future Marxist-Leninist America. Here you can get popular like Daniel Ellsberg and filthy rich like Jane Fonda for being dissident, for criticizing your Pentagon. In future, these people will be simply squashed like cockroaches. Nobody is going to pay them nothing for their beautiful, noble ideas of equality.
But to eliminate the others, to execute the others, don't they serve some purpose? Wouldn't they be the ones we rely on?
They serve purpose only at the stage of destabilization of a nation. For example, your leftists in United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. You have
And they're calling the crisis 2008, the financial crisis. They didn't even mention 2001, which actually started the presidential dictatorship laws and executive orders.
literally several years to live on unless the United States wake up. The time bomb is ticking, that every second the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to, unless you want to live in Antarctica with penguins. This is it. This is the last country of freedom and possibility. If people will fail to grasp the impending danger of that development, nothing ever can help United States. You may kiss goodbye to your freedom, including freedoms to homosexuals, to prison inmate. All this freedom will vanish, evaporate in 5 seconds, including your precious lives. The moment at least part of the United States population is convinced that the danger is real, they have to force their government. And I'm not talking about sending letters, signing petitions, and all this beautiful, noble activity. I'm talking about forcing United States government to stop aiding communism.
There you have it from the mouth of the KGB. Do we need anything else? He never mentioned, because it was not a part in his knowledge or experience, about how the banksters have bought off our representatives. So you combine what he already knows and how they operate with what we know is happening in the money in the cartel, and it's truly a no-brainer. This is what we're facing. And I'm trying to give you and myself, every one of us, the tools that we can actually fight back and get more people and force these executive orders to be repealed. Force the federal government back in the box. Take out these executives that are obviously bought and paid for, our elected representatives, and any others that have been appointed to these agencies. We already know that they basically don't get appointed unless they're approved by the cartel. So we must stop this. And like I said, it's all about the money. Here's a link. I'm not going to go into it. I want you to look at it. I want you to read it. I want you to look at the video. And basically, they're saying the Pentagon and the banksters comprise the secret government, which now runs the US of A. And anyone that tells you differently is lying. And here's the proof. I also wanted to put this article out there for you. The Age of Authoritarianism, Government of the Politicians, by the Military, for the Government. And I believe this is actually true. We've reached a crossroads, and history will show that from this point forward, we will have left behind any semblance of a constitutional government and entered into a militaristic state where all citizens are suspects and security trumps freedom. This is a time when government officials operate off their own self-serving playbook with little in the way of checks and balances, while American citizens are subjected to all manner of indignities and violations with little hope of defending themselves. We have moved beyond the era of representative government and entered a new age. They're calling it the age of authoritarianism. I'm point blank calling it a dictatorship. We are on the verge and having the circumstances set up in such a way that when Obama seizes dictatorial control using these laws, they will have already massively brainwashed the people into saying, oh, this must be the right thing. That's why there's the fight for your mind, the information fight. So I want to give you some other tools to work with as we fight back against the mind. Before we do that, I want to list the 8 tyrannies again and just briefly go down them, because the structure of the coming shift into dictatorial control is going to start with the money. It will start with the money in I believe, relatively speaking, in this order, based on my research and what people are saying. So besides the presidential authority, which is just sitting there, he already has authority to seize dictatorship control. If he took it today, that wouldn't work. We're not prepped yet enough. The water hasn't been turned up enough. We're not quite cooked yet as frogs enough. Where there's still time. That's why we're talking about this information. It's going to start with the money. They're going to collapse the markets and ruin the currency, kill the dollar. And in the process of that, they're going to ruin everybody's savings. We're going to have bank closures like Cyprus did. There's going to be bail-in theft of savings accounts from the people. So whether the people lose their money in a stock or bond market crash, or as a bail-in theft of their savings accounts to the banks, either way, the people, it's going to come out of the people. And that's going to create some responses. And they're, depending on how this happens and what happens, and if food supply chains are broken, that kind of thing, there's going to be martial law. We saw it in Boston. They on a my idea, it's a pretense, on a false flag event. We're going to create an event, and then we're going to lock down the city, and it was a trial. And it went really well as far as the global elite would be concerned. Everybody stayed in their homes. Okay, they didn't have to shoot and kill civilians in the street for leaving the house. So think about it. And then, of course, it's just natural and logical. And besides, the resource directive says that Obama, as a dictator, would be able to control transportation. So it makes absolutely common sense that we won't be able to drive around the country the way we are right now, or possibly leave the country. Obviously, they're already taking the homes. That was one of the crises, and the theft and a land grab. And one of the reasons now that I'm thinking, because of the things I've been reading, and the reasons they want the houses and they're not selling them, we've talked about this growing inventory of foreclosed homes. What are they doing? They're holding them as future assets for a new global currency. You mark my words. They're already manipulating the GMOs and patenting the seeds, and the Supreme Court has already made Monsanto win. You and I can't sue against them no matter what. Can't sue Monsanto. And so the tyranny in these different levels is at different levels, just like the pieces in the puzzle. We have a few pieces for this and a lot of pieces for that, but we can start to see the shape, the outline of the tyranny as it's coming down the pike. Then, of course, water. They're talking about putting chemicals in it. They've been putting chemicals in it even as we speak. And restrictions, we already know that the restrictions on water is one of those resources itemized in the executive order. See, remember, National Defense Resources Preparedness Executive Order last year, 2012, water. There you go. Livestock. If you're a farmer, watch out. They can come and take your cows, pigs, whatever. They can do whatever with them they want. They can take your farm equipment in the name of defending against terrorism. They'll control the food, energy, construction materials. I mean, this is what we're facing and why I feel impelled to talk about it. Then, of course, the air, chemtrails. What are they doing in the air? Why are they doing this? I've got a fabulous documentary on it. I'm not going to play it. You're going to listen to it, I swear. You must listen to it. They're weaponizing weather. They've been experimenting, and that's at the least worst. There's other comments that go even further than that, because they're putting nanoparticles in them that are going to infect the people. So, I don't know what to believe. But I'm telling you that these are the things that we are facing. So, what I'd like to do next is talk about the money and the economy, because you're going to hear all kinds of things that our economy is great. Here are 40 statistics that point out that our economy is not great. Okay, so whenever you read something in the paper and you recognize that it's saying, oh, things are great, everything is wonderful, then you're going to know, start thinking this way. That writer is being either told false information, is being forced to write this, or is part of the regime. So, because here are some facts, and I'm not going to read them all to you, but if you think the economy is in good shape, you have to read these facts. They are just incredible. The U.S. national debt is now 23 times larger than it was when Jimmy Carter was president. Incredibly, more than 56,000 manufacturing facilities in the United States have been permanently shut down since 2001. There are less Americans working in manufacturing today than there were in 1950, even though the population of the country has doubled. According to the New York Times, there are now approximately 70,000 abandoned buildings just in Detroit. Back in 1950, more than 80% of all men in the United States had jobs. Today, less than 65% of all men in the United States have jobs. At this point, an astounding 53% of all American workers make less than $30,000 a year. Small business, how many times do you hear it called the backbone of America, is rapidly dying. At this point, only about 7% of all non-farm workers in the United States are self-employed. That is an all-time record low. They've destroyed small business. Many, many small businesses revolved around real estate. I've talked repeatedly about the millions of contractors, developers, real estate agents, and loan officers, even title companies that have gone bankrupt and belly up in this crash of market values. You subtract all of that, you have economic doldrums. That's what we've got. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, more than 146 million Americans are either poor or low income, and we only have 300 million in the country, including the babies. Overall, the Social Security system is facing a $134 trillion shortfall over the next 75 years. Today, the number of Americans on Social Security disability exceeds the entire population of Greece, and the number of Americans on food stamps exceeds the entire population of Spain. U.S. families that have a head of household that is under the age of 30 have a poverty rate of 37%. Over a third of them are in poverty. As I mentioned recently, the homeownership rate in America is now at its lowest level in 18 years. 45% of all children are living in poverty in Miami. More than 50% of all children are living in poverty in Cleveland, and about 60% of all children are living in poverty in Detroit. And for today, more than 1 million public school students in the United States are homeless. This is the first time that's ever happened in this country. Even in the Great Depression, it didn't happen. They were on the farms. They didn't have food tyranny because people were growing their own food. We don't do that anymore. We don't have farms. They take the homes, they boot the people out. The people are living in shelters or under the bridge and with their kids. So don't tell me, and don't let anyone else tell you, that our economy is good. What is good is the stock market, because that's where all of quantitative easing has been going. Half of America, here's another article, half of America in poverty, and that's creeping to 75%. Now, these are some scary numbers for a couple of reasons. Number one, almost half of Americans had no assets in 2009. And number two, it's getting worse. Based on wage figures, number three, over half of Americans are now in poverty. When they have no assets and there is no food, they will riot. This is a very dangerous situation. They are definitely the have-nots. And I just have to play this to you. This is today. This is about the market. This is a Santelli report. And you gotta listen to what they're trying to figure out and the questions that they have. They're huge questions. These guys talking, they're on the have end of the scale. They're playing in the stock market, which is booming beyond all understanding if you don't understand the dynamics that are going on. It's a fascinating conversation.
Let's get the Santelli exchange for a Tuesday. Rick is rested, tan, and ready to discuss the global impact of easy monetary policy.
I wish the camera could have been rolling the last 10 minutes because we're going wild down here. Listen, Ira and I have one thing in common. We don't care what the future is, and we hope the Fed can thread the needle. But what's important to us and what we like to talk about is trying to bring viewers to what the future is accurately, no matter what it is.
Really? Now, let me remind you that if he actually knew that they're going to break the dollar, destroy the economy, and the president's going to be a dictator, he wouldn't be saying that. He's still thinking that the current pattern is going to hold. They're just looking at their little piece of the puzzle. That's why I want you to look at all the pieces of the puzzle.
To that end, so far, things seem to be working out. The key issue, in my opinion, is when I see a 5-year note at 97 basis points, I mean, we went from the 70s to close to 1% extremely quickly. JGBs have moved rather quickly. If they thread this needle, one of the key issues will be, will they lose control of interest rate markets? And one argument going the other way is that you need good collateral. You need good things to hold. There's only so many pieces of boons or oats or treasuries to go around.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? They're worried that the interest rates are going to go out of control, skyrocket. They've already shown these little bursts. That's what they're talking about in these various markets. And there's only so much collateral, basically, in the world. So keep those points in mind. They are super important.
Will that save the day and keep interest rates from moving up too quickly?
You know, Rick, I think that is the biggest question that people have been, actually, they're all talking about tapering. But with that comes an issue of course, going back to the old monetarist way of thinking of the velocity of money. If there's a high velocity of this money, they'll have a problem.
Now, when you say this money, we're referring to the balance sheet balances,
correct.
Are we not?
Right. $3 trillion plus that is going to be in the system. And last week we
and
heard,
that's just here. That's not the ECB.
Right. And we heard Bernanke talk about rolling off. Well, rolling off is an interesting thing. You know, and you and I have talked about
and rolling off just means he doesn't sell anything, and when the coupon payments come in, basically, or as they mature, he lets them ride off the balance sheet.
Right, and that's okay as long as there's not a high velocity to that money, meaning that the money gets very active. Right now it's not, and that's...
And why are they talking about the high velocity of money being worrisome? Because that would make inflation, okay? The reason the quantitative easing hasn't produced inflation is because they're not giving it to you and me. It's not Main Street that gets this money. They've kept it out of circulation. Why do you think the stock market has boomed? Because that's where it's going. See?
It's been a problem because you look at the M numbers and they've really not been there.
Yeah, no, and that's always been an argument. Don't worry, don't worry,
right.
don't worry.
And I don't want to get too deep into that because it gets much. But when we think about that, the Fed can control this. I mean, if I was running the Fed at this moment, then the role as a macro-prudential regulator should come into play. Because if you do the roll-offs, then if you go to a very high-level capital, where they're basically going to shove this down the throat of the too big to fail banks by really strict capital requirements and collateral requirements, so their ability not to lend out that money.
Now,
did you hear that? They already know. They see their little pieces of the puzzle. The Basel III has come down with tougher capital requirements and collateral requirements for banks, which means that credit is going to tighten, even fewer loans than now, and this is why we're talking about home values possibly crashing, because people won't be able to get a loan because the banks need collateral, and so it's a bank against the people fight. They're going to hold back to protect themselves and stay in business. Who cares about you and me? We're just going to be thrown under the bus, and they see this coming, and this is why I found this conversation so fascinating. They don't see the big picture. I'm trying to talk to you about the big picture.
But this is the cool part, people. So we've had the banks basically as managed in many ways as interest rates. So what you're saying is that if there is this panic that could occur where everybody wants to blow out of treasuries because rates are going up, what they'll do is they'll close all the bargeways by the banks they already have under their thumbs to prevent them from, in essence, flooding the market with the good collateral they are holding.
Correct, right. And then it'll be the role of the shadow banking. So we don't know this. And the Fed is they make this seem like it's a given. This is all theoretical.
But you know what I hear, and we got to go? I hear more control. See, so we continue in some ways. If the bright side of this is the banks have to do what we say because we saved them, are we really fixing something, or are we just nationalizing more?
Well, that's exactly right. We don't know. But as you and I talked about, to make it simplistic for the viewers, Bernanke and company who the models got us to the moon. The real test will be, can they get us back? Because that was the real test of the Apollo mission.
So we never want to hear, Washington, we have an interest rate problem.
Right.
Back to you.
Correct.
Washington, we have an interest rate problem. Yes, interest rates are going to explode when bonds collapse, and it's going to catch fire. And that is a technique and basically a prediction of how they are going to shift out of the dollar into a global currency, because it is about the money. This is a fabulous article. I highly recommend you read it yourself. I'm going to be sharing just the basics and the summary of it, because they're basically saying, talked about the financial regulations, talked about how the capital requirements are increasing, refers to Cyprus. Notice how that's like we don't hear anything about Cyprus, and yet they've devastated that country. They've ruined those businesses and all those people. They've taken all their money. And of course, this article points out that the big bucks from Russia, they were allowed to escape. And so it hurt the people even worse. And this was a test run. Cyprus was a test run of the new financial regulations. in the same way that MF Global was a test run in the United States. But you had to be in the know, and it only affected these small little groups. And so when we're paying attention to it, but are your neighbors? Nah, they don't know or care yet. They will. Now, this is what they're talking about, and this is the disconnect that we see, because with the Bank of Japan, he talks about the ongoing bond implosion in Japan. It's going to start there. The bonds are going to drop, which pushes the interest rates up, which, just like they said on Santelli, hey, we got an interest rate problem. An interest rate problem is going to just blow it sky high, because we have trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that we're supposed to pay interest on this country. And if the interest is higher than like zero, we won't be able to pay. So what if interest rates start actually climbing on the world market? Nobody would want the treasuries. I mean, it's just truly a destabilizing thing. The house of cards starts to fall. And so a couple of things that I wanted to point out was that they have been trashing gold and silver for almost 2 months on talking heads. And the fact of the matter is, the gold and silver coin prices, if you just go to Google, just look at it right now, just pull up some prices, and as we saw in Santelli, the gold price was $13.85 an ounce. I mean, just not that long ago it was $1,800. They have been keeping an artificial lid. They've been setting the price down on gold and silver to orchestrate everything is fine. They're playing the game as we're cooking us in the pot. They're playing the game, well, if things were troubling, you'd see it in gold and silver. And I'm telling you, no, you won't, because they set the price themselves. So that is something that we can use to protect ourselves. We can actually start to collect some gold and silver. I recommend legal tender. I've already talked about that. The 1985 Gold Coin Act passed on the federal level by Ron Paul. Thank you very much, Ron Paul. It is legal for you and me to own gold coins as legal tender. They can't steal it. It's actually money. It's real legal money. So I recommend that you buy that when you're shifting some of your paper assets into that. They talk about how we should watch the bond implosion in Japan as starting it, because as it progresses, then Japan being most leveraged, they will fall first, and that will lead, it'll trigger debt markets in Europe to implode, and then the debt markets in the US. And so this is the pattern that he's talking about. He's probably right. It's certainly worth being aware of and thinking about with me. So here's the attitude, and here's the point. They're going to use this to lie to the people, brainwash them from the media talking heads into, oh, gee, you know what the problem was? It wasn't quadrillions in debt that we were that we did intentionally, says the bank, so that we could steal your money and shift into a world currency. They're not going to tell you that, but they're going to call it a currency problem. And the fact of the matter is, they have so much credit, fiat credit in the system, it can never be paid off. You got quadrillions, give me a break. And so how do they bring this down? What is the controlled demolition? That's basically how they're going to change the system, protect themselves, crucify you and me. And here's another very interesting point I wanted to point out before we zip into the next issues. But hyperinflation is not the quantitative easing. Have you noticed that we have not had hyperinflation? You and I have experienced inflation, and they will say inflation's at 2% or something, because now they don't count food, gas, anything that you and I actually used to live with. They don't count that anymore. They just pulled those things out because, ooh, that's scary if we actually looked at what was happening with those. And so, but hyperinflation is the loss of confidence in a currency. So when the people start to feel that it's really the problem of the currency, it's the dollars, and we need a better currency system, that's how they're going to do it. That's how they're going to shift and play the game so that they can have a world currency. here's the point, and the reason the system is struggling is because when they took the dollar, which is the world's reserve currency, off of gold, so there was no limit to what they could produce, they have massively produced quadrillions of fiat credit, and there's nothing left to buy. You heard Santelli say it. They talked about there's only a limited amount of hard assets in the world. We've hit the limit. The system has hit the limit. And so when there's nothing else to buy and to be collateralized, then the fact is, then it goes as a downturn. And in a Keynesian system like this, when there's no hard assets behind any of the currency, it just collapses. It's called deflation. And that's why they're talking about deflation coming even as prices skyrocket. It's interesting to study and to understand. The key is, how do we protect ourselves? I wanted to point this article out to you because it says there's a global currency war looming. They're prepping. This is a prep piece. Read this as a prep piece. They're brainwashing us into thinking it's a global currency war. And they're saying corruption at the World Bank unsettles the gold market. No, it didn't. It didn't. All this corruption, and gold is still just sitting at 13. Well, it was 1396 yesterday. Now it's 1385. It's going down. Do you see the disconnect? You gotta start thinking about it like this. So this is what's actually going to be happening. Oh yeah, one more thing. Japan, see, they're not quite ready to pull the trigger. And trust me, I believe that they think that they can control it until they want to pull the trigger. I believe that they may be wrong. And the market may get away from them. Only time will tell. But here you've got Bank of Japan. Oops, we're going to step in and we're not going to let the bond market collapse yet. We're going to curb the turbulence. We're going to keep things on an even keel. Keep those frogs in the pot while we turn the heat up some more. And so you've got everyone, all the governments and the bankster cartel, they're playing a game. And they're moving their pieces. They're putting their puzzle together to take control of you and me. So here's what's going to happen briefly. I'm just going to summarize, and then we're going to move on to the next tyranny. They're going to kill the dollar because they want a global currency and all paper assets. Now, paper assets are like the savings. These are just digital numbers in the bank's account. So like in Cyprus, they just took them. They'll take yours. Anything, even paper cash, actual Federal Reserve notes, I hate to call them dollars, but actual notes in your pocket, in your wallet, there's a huge shortage of that. And so this is why when they closed the banks, like they closed the banks in Cyprus, cash was king. Because people that had cash could still buy stuff. And other people that didn't have cash and needed some cash would sell things cheap. So obviously, I recommend, it's just common sense to have some cash on hand, perhaps 3 months of expenses. That came from somebody else. However much you feel that you can actually pull out of your daily swirl, have some actual dollars, get some $100 bills, get some 50s, some 20s, so that you can actually go buy something with cash if necessary. So guess what happened to me on Sunday? So my husband and I went out to the coast and we wanted to buy some salmon, and oh gee, their credit system was down, their credit card system. And so we had cash. So my husband just paid with a $20 bill and we had our salmon. Another lady was standing at the ATM complaining to us as we passed by that it was going to cost her $3 just to buy her loaf of bread because she didn't have any cash on hand. I'm telling you, it was just like a red signal right in front of my eyes. Oh my goodness, that's exactly what it's going to look like. People are going to go, I don't have any cash. I can't buy things. Everyone demands cash. We talked about that in Cyprus. And so they're standing in these long lines. Remember that article? Everybody's employed in Cyprus because they're standing all day in lines at the ATM to get their $300 per withdrawal. Mark my words. Start withdrawing some now. Start getting some cash together. Your stocks, bonds, money markets, and IRAs are just digits in some bank's account. I highly recommend that you get them in your name, even if you have to pay taxes on it. That is not the point. You will have some of your principal left. They will absolutely confiscate at least part of your accounts in the bank. You will lose your money if it's left in the bank. Their goal is a one world currency, and when I say chip money, they're talking about putting chips in us somewhere, that they would, all currency would be digital on your person in some kind of a device. The action that they're going to use to get there, they're going to have some bank closures as appropriate when they start seeing they're trying to control the collapse. They'll close the banks like Cyprus. They'll kill the dollar. People will start to lose confidence. It'll hyperinflate. They'll say, "Oh, oops, we need a one global currency backed with assets." So, highly recommend that you take whatever monies that you don't need for your daily living and go and buy some gold and silver coin. They have pushed the value right now. The spot value of silver is an artificial low price at $22, 22 and change per 1 ounce. Walk in Liberty. They plan, the word on the street is that they will reset these prices. When everything falls apart, they're going to stop trading in gold and silver. They can do that. And then when they come back on market and allowed to buy, they will reset the price. The numbers they're talking about are $150 to $250 an ounce for silver and $7,000 to $8,000 per ounce for gold. So, when that's going to happen, I can't tell you, but I do know that the things I've been looking at and we see the weaknesses, the cracks in the system. They're talking about us being in really dire straits by fall, September, October, November, December. So that's why I feel so important that I have to share this with you. Oh, by the way, just for your information, here's the Single Global Currency Association, so that you can review that and how you can help, how you can reach out and push forward the idea of a single global currency. Fascinating. Now, there's a lot of other tyrannies coming down. I want to talk next about the security and mobility tyrannies. We're talking about riots, when they take away the money, people don't have cash. We all depend on the food coming in from the stores. Very few of us grow our own food or could survive on just what we have in the fridge right now for very long. So people will be very hungry and they will be looking for food and goods and services like toilet paper. I've found myself actually wondering, oh gee, how much would I need? These are issues that we should start thinking about. So here's the point about the security. We already know in the presidential directives that Department of Homeland Security, which has already purchased 2,700 billion bullets or something. I mean, they have all the bullets on the planet, okay, so that you and I can't have any bullets. Why is that? Now it makes sense, right? So I want to tell you what the sheriffs are doing, because they're not happy with the gun laws. So in Colorado, the sheriffs are suing over new state gun laws.
Dozens of sheriffs in Colorado have filed a lawsuit against a raft of newly mandated background checks and gun restrictions. And so here's the only sheriff that's not involved in the lawsuit explaining why.
Supportive of the background checks actually all along. We ought to be doing everything that we can to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. And so you can't say that on one hand, and on the other hand, oppose this legislation.
So, Andrew, what do you think? Is Colorado somehow becoming a microcosm for the debates on gun control that we're seeing happen on a national level?
Yeah, I would say that's completely fair to say. In Colorado, we've just had after we've had a really contentious session due mainly to these gun bills. They five major gun bills total, and three of those are have already been signed. One of them is scheduled to go, or two of them are scheduled to go into effect on July 1st, whereas the other one, which is which would require people who purchase firearms to pay for their own background check. It's a fee of $10. That one's already gone into effect as of the governor's signing. But in Colorado, we've got legislators who right now are facing recall efforts because of their support for the gun control legislation. I think we've got about at least four legislators right now who are facing recall efforts. And so in Colorado, it's really been just a very contentious issue, with the sheriffs especially joining in a lawsuit a federal lawsuit to basically call these gun control bills unconstitutional because they allege that they infringe on the Second Amendment rights.
Sheriffs in Colorado have filed a lawsuit against a raft of newly mandated background checks and gun restrictions. And so here's the only sheriff that's not.
All right. So the issue is they're filing a lawsuit. They're planning a conference that's basically the end of this week, May 31st, June 1st. They're wanting to put the feds back in their place. They call it the Heartland of America Conference. It's the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, and the white knights are swelling to epic proportions. Now, the fact of the matter is, many of these sheriffs do see the federal government, DHS, these executive orders from Obama, overstepping the bounds, and they're fighting back. We need to support them. And if you wanted to go to the conference, I would highly recommend if you can get there. Here is American sheriffs uniting to defy Obama's gun-grabbing laws. We saw last week how the citizens were objecting in New Jersey at a city council meeting about the new gun control laws. The fact is, and here's the fact, the ways that we are talking about as we predict the picture that is forming as we put the pieces of the puzzle together is that there will be riots in the city. There won't be food. There will be loss of money and income. There will be all these poor people. They can't buy food and supplies right now, and probably even for the next week, much less for the next 3 to 4 months or 6 months. And so they're going to be hungry. They're going to be rioting. And there's comments in articles, I won't even bother showing, but you can find them on the internet, that the police, when a whole city is going to riot, it's way outside the police control. They're going to go home and take care of their families, all right? And so the fact of the matter is, it's a perfect opportunity for DHS, the military, contractors to come in and police the cities. And the whole goal, it's all planned. We got to understand, this is planned. They know this is coming. This is what they're preparing for. I don't know if you've seen them. I've seen them. You just Google the military transportation of military equipment, something like that, on Google, and you will see video after video with hours of pictures of tanks, thousands, hundreds of thousands of tanks being shipped around this country. Other big military vehicles. It's truly an eye-opener. So here's the point. It depends where you live. Are you in a city? It's going to be worse in the cities. It's going to be tough. So I highly recommend that you consider, where would I go? If this city was in flames and everybody was rioting on the streets, where would I want to be and how do I get there? And so try to find a safer place to go. Make sure that you have a car that will get you there. Now is not the time to have a car breakdown. Have extra gas. What if there's no gas in the stations? What do you want to be, stranded out in the middle of the desert if you're traveling somewhere? So, and if you're in a car, make sure that you attach the gas outside the car. You don't want to die of fumes. Make sure you have maps. What if they shut down all GPS? What if our smartphones don't work anymore? Start thinking in these manners, because if we're wrong, it certainly doesn't hurt to think about it and have a plan. If we're right, you'll be really glad you did. Get your passport. Get a passport. I don't care if you have plans to travel or not. You may suddenly have plans to travel. Did you see how they have all the information on all the people? And I thought, oh goodness, they don't need any person. They've already got that with Google. Google knows everything about you and me if you have a smartphone. They already read all of our emails. We're already talking about that. I already laugh about that with contacts that call me and contact me. So we understand where we're in. It may be wise to have a passport and have some place in mind outside of the United States to go. And then the comment that I'm making, these are strategies to protect yourself for these issues. Prepare to camp out. For example, what if all the electricity is turned off? What if they do that intentionally? What are you going to do about it? Well, you're going to be freezing in your house if it's too cold, or boiling in your house. So what can you do to protect yourself in that? What can you do to make life easier? How can you keep warm without using energy? How can you keep food without using energy? So don't stock up stuff in the freezer. Stock up stuff that does not need any outside source of energy to maintain its quality. So I'm thinking of, smoked meats, canned goods, vacuum sealed stuff, fresh fruits and vegetables that are growing in your garden, on your deck of your little house, your little condo. Think about a camp stove, propane. You could actually cook something. What if you can't cook on your gas stove or your electric stove? What about building a fire? Maybe now's the time to get a fire pit for the backyard. $35, $50, whatever. Start thinking in terms of what would make my life easier? Okay, no lights at night. How about lanterns? How about some lantern oil? How about stocking up on that? Either that or a bunch of candles. You see what I'm saying? These are the kinds of thoughts that I want to put into your head so that you can really survive, relatively speaking, adequately in this coming potential conflict and tough times that this country is going to face. We already know that this is the plan. We already know this is what they want. That's why I'm talking about it. All right, housing. We already know that our homes are being stolen. They're being stolen fraudulently. We already know it's on fraudulent paperwork. We already know that the attorney generals know that this is fraudulent paperwork. We already know they're not prosecuting the criminals. So think about what we know and what that implies. And this is why it's so difficult to get anybody to listen, because the Department of Justice has already been bought off at the federal level. We already know they've got links to many of the AGs at the state level. And the fact is, it is a national problem. It should be prosecuted at the federal level. So a state AG has to sort of step out of their box to try to do this. Now we've been focused and working on a statewide grand jury. I've emailed for feedback on why isn't that starting yet here in California. I have not had a response. I think it's about time we start really clamoring and start demanding and start writing letters and press releases. We must force. That's what the KGB expert said. You got to force the government to do the right thing because they've been bought off. Besides just plain inertia. So here's the point. Here's one of the points. I believe right now that values are mushrooming simply because it's not the buyers, that are pushing it up. It's all the cash coming from some from people, but a lot from hedge funds and other sources. And so I do believe that their goal is to own the property. They want to own the country. And I believe all of these empty, vacant foreclosures, they're hanging on to them, and they're going to be using them as asset base for the coming global currency. That could be one reason why they're not listing. So they get two things. One is the value of these homes do rise in value. They do have all of this inventory as a potential asset for the future in a new currency. But they also then will push all the people into renters. If they'd never list them, and they eventually get occupied, it'll be occupied by a tenant. And tenants are way easier to control than actual homeowners and business owners. That's why they're forcing people into rentership, because ownership, home owners, are the toughest ones to control. They think they have some value, they think they have some rights, and they're willing to fight for their rights. That's why we're facing the devastation in foreclosing that we've been facing. It's played into lots of values, that a lot of actions and their values. They've pushed it up, and they've broken the back of all the contractors and developers. They've pushed all these people out. They've ruined all the small business owners by crashing these values. I mean, talk about clever. Sadistic and clever is what I find myself writing to others when I interact with them. So a strategy, we're going to keep staving off foreclosure however you can. With a QWR, a Freedom of Information Act. I've got people coming on the show on Thursday to talk about their successes. Renee's going to give us an update and an overview of, again, what do you do? I want to tell you and remind each and every person that ever watches the show, go to the foreclosure defense page and watch some of my workshops. I've done workshops on all of these different issues. It at least gets you some awareness and some manner of documents that you can start to use. Analyze your documents. A lot of people are not looking at that, and they say, oh, what should I do next? Go analyze your documents and use the fraud and forgery that you find in those documents in your qualified written request to help stave off foreclosure. What you basically want is for them to not take your home and to live there as long as possible. If you own the home in a manner that actually is above water, you're not underwater, you could actually sell this and get some assets, some money out of it. I've been discussing with some of my clients this concept. How do we protect ourselves, get the hard asset money out of our house but still live there? Right now, investors are going willy-nilly. So what about this concept? And mull this over. If you have any questions, ask me. But we're discussing selling the home with rent-back terms as part of the sale process, up to 5 years. So the homeowner says in the sale, the listing, that I want to sell this for X amount, whatever the highest and best price they can get in the market. With this term, the owner requires the ability to rent back at some amounts, some range of amounts, or some kind of rental price that you'd be willing to pay for the next 5 years, subject to the owner's discretion. So if you want to leave in 2 or 3 years, you can leave. If you want the full 5 years, you can stay. The idea is you can pull the asset, the paper, the illiquid value that has been mushrooming now out of your real estate. You can convert that into something, a hard asset like gold and silver coin that is transportable, that you will have, that is set to increase at least 5 to 8 times when this all goes down, if it does, so that then nobody else can get a loan, values are going to crash again, it's going to be just more jobs are lost, it's going to be another huge misery. But ideally, you're positioned to either buy the house back from the person that is now your landlord, or buy something else. What if you don't want to relocate in your city? What if you want to go to another country? What if you want to go to another state? This would allow you some assets with which to make those decisions. That's the idea behind that. So fight off the foreclosure. I personally am not, it's up to each person if you want to take the loan modification that they offer you. I'm telling you right now, not one loan modification is legal, and I'm pretty confident that most of the money that you pay on your loan mod will never be applied to the principal correctly. In the end, they will take the house from you. I think it's probably a smarter bet if you can pull it off, if you can play that game, than to just keep fighting and staving off the foreclosure. It's a tough one. It's highly stressful. Here's the point on food. This is the Monsanto, March Against Monsanto. They intentionally do this for corporate profits and to control the population. And virtually now they're putting pesticides in the seeds themselves. So the fact, and for example, they start with corn and all the cattle eat corn. So all of this stuff is now in the food chain. You and I are basically going to be eating this stuff unless we do something about it. There's not a whole lot we can do about some of the GMO because many of the states and the federal government fight back against the labeling. They want the labeling. We want the labeling. They don't. The issue is on the PLU. This is the product ID number. It's the little code that you can scan, and it'll say if you have a sticker, let's say on an apple, and like bananas, I forget the number, but bananas are number 4011. It's a 4-digit code, and all bananas have that. If it's organic, then they put a 5-digit code and they have a 9 in front of, so it's 94011. That's an organic banana. If it's 8, that's GMO. If it's a genetically modified food, 8 stands for GMO. So you can just look at some of the fruits and vegetables, see if they're marked, see what it says. That's on fresh fruit and vegetables. Obviously, we don't see GMOs in the cereal in our boxes. These are things that people are fighting for, but we don't have that yet. And so again, if you can grow your own, buy it from a farmer near you. Those are things that will really help you be assured that you're not ingesting these toxic substances. Here's, I want to bring 2 websites for GMOs and to your attention. Here's where 800 scientists are demanding that this GMO experiment stop. And they've demanded this. They've called on world powers to reevaluate the future of agriculture and seek sustainability rather than corporate profits. The mainstream media won't touch it. Duh. This is a tyranny, guys. This is what tyranny looks like. 800 scientists did make a demand. They made it over a decade ago. And here's the next link. This is the open letter from world scientists to all governments concerning genetically modified organizations. They're extremely concerned about the hazards to biodiversity, food safety, human and animal health, and demand a moratorium on environmental releases in accordance with this precautionary principle. They call for a ban on patents of life forms and living processes, which threaten food security, sanction biopiracy of indigenous knowledge and genetic resources, and violate basic human rights and dignity. So we need to get any scientists that we know to sign the letter. We need to make this going around as a blast around the planet. We need to ban genetically modified food. And the fact is, our Supreme Court just said Monsanto has a patent, so I guess the patent's good. It is truly an astonishingly outrage. So, grow your own, stock up on unperishables. That would be in case we're facing a crisis. I know that some folks already have that as a way they live, and it's probably a very good common sense, and at some point it'll probably pay off really well. And a lot of other people laugh at them saying, well, nothing's happened yet. You keep saying the sky is falling. Yeah, well, when the sky falls, you'll be glad you did. We just don't know when. We just have to recognize that I do believe it's coming down. We see the signs everywhere. Water. I want to remind you that water is one of the resources in the National Defense Preparedness Act. The executive order from Obama, he's going to control water resources. So if the water is turned off to your house, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? I mean, think about it. I have started to think about it. The goal, they can control the population and they can just raise the prices and just pull the money out of your pocket. What are you going to do? Not drink any water? And so you're going to pay and pay and pay. It's a way of controlling the population. And also, if they have control of these resources and you're on a large city water, municipal water, who knows what they can put in there? They can put stuff in there all the time and never tell you. What do you do? Chemically test it every time you drink it? So these are some of the suggestions. Filter your water. Make some rain barrel storage. Store water for watering your plants. What if they start charging so much you can barely have enough to just drink? Then how are you going to grow any food? These are natural and logical extensions of these tyrannies as we face them actually coming down on the population. And this is another reason, and I really hope that this pushes you and me even harder and faster to do more and try to make our efforts more significant to stop this tyranny, because life under this tyranny does not look good. And that is another point of what I'm bringing to your attention. Some of you are going to have the ability to drill a well on your property. Most of you city dwellers have absolutely no possibility of that. Possibly now is a time to rethink about relocation. Even if you're near a river or stream, there are simple tests that you can do on the water. You can purify that water. You can get reverse osmosis. That way you have pure water and you have a supply of water that is not coming from a controlled source. These are just thoughts I'm putting out there for you. If the shoe fits, stick it on. We're talking about air. The air tyranny. They have been tyrannizing us via chemtrails for a decade. I just found out about chemtrails last year, and this is part of the problem. This goes right back to what the KGB expert said. It takes 15 to 30 years, and that's when you've got mainstream media doing your work. So we don't even, to shift the mindset. And I've noticed so many of these things that come to me that people are sending, they were done in, 2004, 6, 2008, 2010. I mean, years ago. They're valid, totally valid, but now we're just finding them. It's because the mainstream media has a lid on it. And so the dissemination of information has been capped. And this is why it's taking so long. It's a definite plan. So we need to, again, use Facebook, use Twitter, use group emails to blast this out, because people need to understand that what they've been doing in chemtrails is to basically, the main documentary explains it's to manipulate the weather, and it's to basically win wars with weather. If they can create specific storms, supersized hail, flooding against an enemy, then they have the advantage. And of course, we have to understand now that the enemy is us. It's you and me. They're practicing and doing this constantly on the United States, but they're actually doing it worldwide. It's everywhere. Chemtrails are everywhere. Here is the link to the award-winning documentary. It's available in all of these languages. Send it to anybody and everybody around the planet, because it says, why in the world are they spraying? It talks about what they're spraying, the heavy metals. The fact is they've got so many heavy metals now in the sky that it's actually dimming the sunlight. They've actually calculated that the sunlight dimming around the planet dims in various percentages, but it's between 16 and 32% less sunlight is reaching the Earth right now. They talk about how they seed the cumulus clouds. They talk about where seeding happens in high pressure, where the devastation happens in the low pressure areas. And so the West Coast in the country gets a lot of the chemtrails because they're seeding the clouds. And they talked about what happens when they do that and how the cloud will dissipate into a gray or brown haze. And just Sunday, when my husband and I were driving to the coast, we looked south, and I said, well, now that looks wicked. And what it looked like to us from our experience in Southern California, it looked like smog. It was a low-lying, brown, hazy cloud hanging just above the Petaluma area, Roanoke Park, Petaluma, which is south of me. I'm in Santa Rosa. And I said, okay, now that looks weird. And then the very next day, I'm watching this video, which explains that that's what happens to clouds when they're treated with this aerosol sprays. So we know it's landing on us. We know we're breathing it. In fact, my husband taught chemistry in high school. I've actually talked to him about how could we actually do a little test in our backyard to see what kind of chemicals are falling. So I'm going to be following up on that, because this is something, when we can convert it into something that we can see and our neighbors can see, we may be able to reach out with these obvious results to our neighbors, our officials, and get more awareness. Like I said, we've got 8 tyrannies to pick from. So now we're into air tyranny, and maybe one of these tyrannies will snag the attention of acquaintances that we've got. They'll never listen to you on home foreclosures. It's like, done with that. Those are all deadbeat people. Their minds are already made up. But maybe they'll listen to you when you tell them, hey, look what I found in my backyard. Why don't we filter in your backyard? And they go, what? That's what we need. We need shriekers. Something that will really get us on page 1 that mainstream media cannot ignore, because just remember, Rachel Maddow is breathing this stuff too. They're all breathing this stuff. Everybody you see, every talking head, every person involved, they're all breathing this same stuff. So here's how to protect. Here's some ideas of how to protect your family and yourself. This happens to be a website to stop spraying in California. And you know what's really interesting is that Monsanto had this big march, but I don't know of anybody in this city that it actually talks about chemtrails. In fact, I mentioned chemtrails to some people at the Monsanto march, and they go, what? What are you talking about? So this has not yet hit the media the way it needs to hit. And maybe the air we breathe is something that would be universal, that people would say, you know something, that's me. So obviously, here you can read the list, but it says, stay indoors when chemtrails are being sprayed, drink plenty of water. I would say filter the water that you drink. Build up your immune system as strong as possible, because chemtrails weaken the immune system. All these heavy metals are not good for us. Get direct sunlight when the spraying stops. And of course, like I said, it won't be quite as strong as it used to be, sorry. Go to a health and vitamin store and get a heavy metal detox supplement. There's something that I plan to do. Keep young children and the elderly inside, especially during spraying. Avoid vitamins that contain lots of minerals that could mix with chemtrail metals to accelerate those negative effects. Increase vitamin D intake. Eat cilantro. That's a natural herb that helps your body excrete metals. Educate yourself. They're saying right here, keep 2 to 3 months of water, food, and money in the event there's a breakout of some airborne disease. They talk about red wine as basically has helped some people to excrete or reduce the heavy metal intake that they have. I love this. I love this. If you ever needed it, here's an excuse. You can eat ice cream. Ice cream, if nothing else, forms a mucus in the body that helps surround the chemtrail ingredients through the lower intestine tract where normally they'd be absorbed. So you must have your ice cream every day, and apple pectin. So an apple a day is still good, solid health news, and it helps remove radiation from your system, and that's apple pectin they're talking about. But you can eat fresh apples. So they have found that raw apples are the richest fruits in pectin. So drink lots of apple juice, eat apples within the first 12 hours of a chemtrail spraying. So these are things that we can do to protect our family and ourselves. This is the point. We need each other. Okay, when it comes right down to it, the first line of defense is our physical beings. If you commit suicide, if you're not here, then it's weakened the group, the movement. So we have to keep ourselves, and I'm sorry to be so blunt about it, but I think we need to really get this in control get a picture in our mind of the big picture. So the picture is have cash on hand for the money tyranny. Get all of your paper assets as much as possible. Your IRAs, even if you have to pay taxes, you'll pay them next year. At this point, it's better to have some of your IRA money than none of it. They will take that. They will nationalize the IRA accounts. That's what they're talking about. Try to get it into some gold and silver so that you can have some hard assets to help protect yourself through this troubling time. think about where you live. Get a pre-planned and a well-prepared exit. Have extra gas on hand. It just cannot hurt to have extra gas in a gas can outside the house, and able to take that with you in a manner that is not going to kill you with gas fumes. So try to pay attention to this. Get your passport. Get it now. They're booked, and that's fine. People are traveling. That's great. So I'm working on my passport. I don't have one. I got one 25 years ago. So it's long expired. And right here in Santa Rosa, it's about 10 days out. Every passport appointment at the post office is 15 minutes, and they are booked. They're booked for 10 to 15 days solid. Just right here in Santa Rosa. All these people wanting to travel. So go in, get the form, figure it out. It's going to cost a few bucks, 110 I think, for the passport, and get your picture. You have to go get it at someplace else. The post office doesn't do that anymore. They just collect the documents, check them, send them in to get the passport. Just get it done. Consider your home situation. Fend off foreclosure as long as possible. The whole point being to live there until you decide not to. If you have equity in the house, consider selling it on a rent back. It can't hurt to even try to sell it and to get a rent back, because at least you'd have your assets in hand and mobile. Stock up on your food. Try not to eat GMOs. Grow your own. Filter your water. Get some extra storage, water storage, even water bottles. Store some water on hand. What if the water source does become unsafe? Or if you're on a well, the electricity's out and you can't get the water out of the well. Start thinking in terms of, where am I really weak? If electricity failed, what would happen? And then, make a list. Go down the checklist. Can you drill a well? Hey, drill a well. Can you relocate next to a river or a stream? Consider it. And then be aware of the chemtrails, what's going on. Try to protect yourself from that toxic stuff they're spraying. Try to detoxify yourself. Bring that awareness to everybody. And I'm going to be pushing for actual testing of toxics in landing on filter paper in my backyard. I haven't had it just occurred to me yesterday, so I'm working on that. And I think these little test kits might prove invaluable for public awareness. And once we get them aware that what you're breathing is toxifying you and reducing your immune system and going to cause problems, I think we might have people's attention, because that is very personal. It doesn't matter your income, if you're poor, rich, business owner, employee, news reporter, media reporter. This is going to affect them, and they're going to know it. This personalizes it on a level that the more I think about it and talk about it, the more I like, because that's what's missing. How do we get mainstream media to break off these chains of being mum and just playing along in the game? Because it's personally damaging to them. That's something that I'm thinking about. So there are ways we can fight back. There are things we can do and are doing. We have to keep that pressure up. And I want to bring to your attention that the Public Banking Convention, remember, it's all about the money. And the Public Banking Convention is about the money. It's about the money and the fiat credit, and how can we as the people take that back and out of the game the banks are playing. So that's happening this next weekend. We're really excited about it. It's going to be a webcast. There's going to be all these speakers and workshops. I'm going to be down there interviewing speakers after their workshop, asking questions. I'm super excited about it. Consider going if you can. It's at the Dominican University Angelica Hall, 50 Acacia Avenue in San Rafael. You can look it up on the publicbankinginstitute.org website. Many of you I know are already coming. I look forward to meeting you in person, because a lot of you I haven't yet met, and we're just friends from afar. Don't forget the Santa Barbara Parade, Kimmy and her pink party, and bringing awareness of these issues to a whole lot of people that just won't listen to us because of foreclosures. We need to still fight and focus and keep our homes, but we also need to expand this awareness. So again, on here, if you have a minute, just 3 minutes, just 2 minutes, just 1 minute, call this number. It's a voice message number, And it'll just, the question to answer is, what made you start to become aware? Why are you actually aware of these things? What woke you up? It says, they keep saying, wake up, America, wake up, America. And I'm saying, wake up, we're facing the tyranny. What woke you up? Share it with us, because then whatever you share with us, we can share with each other, and we can use that to help wake other people up. Let's find out what is waking people up. Because obviously I woke up in foreclosures, okay? And now look at the tyranny that I'm sharing. So a lot of us that we're talking about, this was Homeowners for Justice, and it started with foreclosures and fighting fraudulent foreclosures. So a lot of us woke up in the foreclosure piece of the puzzle. And that is something that we need to understand. Has someone, they've woken up. So in Monsanto, when I went over there on the food, that was a food wake up. All those people woke up because of food. So I took little handouts. I actually had this taped to my little name tag, and I said, I only got about 60 of them printed. So I passed them out to the 61st people, and I just said, our corrupt government, talked about the live stream, talked about the email, and our government supports food tyranny, supports housing tyranny, supports dollar tyranny, supports freedom tyranny, and supports savings loss. And people took them, and they said, what's that about? What's a bail-in? So I'm going to put this on the website, Homeowners for Justice. You can print these, black and white, I don't care. Just pass them out willy-nilly, because people need to say, what? What? I didn't even talk. This I did on Saturday, okay? Today, I'm talking about water, security, chemtrails. I didn't even talk about chemtrails. A lot of the people, while we were there, if you watched any of the little live stream I did, I showed the chemtrails. They were chemtrailing right above us in the park. And I just frankly felt that it was intentional, that they've chemtrailed all the Monsanto people, all of those marching against them, all the marchers against Monsanto. They probably chemtrailed them everywhere around the world. I'd love to have proof of that, because that would be super significant. I swear to you, if you were at, please let me know, if you went to a Monsanto march against Monsanto on Saturday, please, and you saw chemtrails, even if you don't have a picture, if you saw them yourself, please tell me, just email me, leave a voice message on that number, so that we can actually hear about it. The 583-9497, leave a message saying I marched against Monsanto, and I don't care where on the planet you were, what city, what state, what country. Tell me if you saw chemtrails, because it would make sense to me that they did that intentionally. They know they're spraying poison. They know this. It's intentional. That's the point. Let's never ever forget. And so here's another solution. We gotta go, but I wanted to share this with you because it is truly a new eye opener, and that is, it's all about aquaponics. And look at what they're doing with this aquaponics. This is cool. It's vertical, and they've got red worms.
Hi, so today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite parts of this system. It's in response to some of the folks that have asked questions on some of our other YouTube videos about using redworms. So in traditional hydroponic systems, this isn't always a possibility. The nutrient solution will probably kill your worms. And they're not necessarily something you want in traditional hydro, because they're always kind of consuming these solids and producing solids of their own. And it's more biologically active than most hydro guys really want. But I'm not saying it's impossible. Especially when you're starting to look at organic hydroponic methods. We're talking using manure teas, nutrient teas, and the like for your production. We do aquaponic production, so we're using fish waste in a solution that we just recirculate constantly, and we use red worms in our towers. Okay, so red worms are really awesome. They're great at taking unavailable nutrients that are tied up in organic solids and organic compounds and consuming them, and they're like little bioreactors. All the microbes inside their guts basically help mineralize, break those solids down, oxidize them, mineralize them, release them back into the solution, and a lot of the time they're almost immediately plant available. So the plants can start taking those nutrients up right out of those castings. If the plants don't take them up, they just go right back into the solution, and they circulate, and they do their thing. It's part of the marvelous cycle of life in aquaponics. So people ask, how do you get red worms in your system? Well, you start by ordering a few red worms online. And we did that a number of years ago. And then we basically put them in worm bins like this, and this is really all you need. It's just a few Tupperware tubs from Walmart, pretty cheap. Drill some holes in it so they drain, drill some holes so there's some good aeration, and then just start throwing all of your waste from your system in. And if you're a home or a hobby producer, start throwing in all your waste from your kitchen. And pretty soon you end up with this nice, rich, kind of mix of great stuff. And the nice thing is you can do this inside if you're a home producer. It doesn't smell. And that's the nice thing about vermicompost, is if you mix it very nicely, if you keep it in good shape, you can do this inside without too many issues. So you see I've got some really nice rich stuff here, and if you notice it's just crawling with worms. Well, what happens after we kind of have this vermicomposted in these bins is we take this media, we take this vermicompost basically, and we just plant our seeds into it. So we start our seedlings for our system in these, basically like plug trays. So we're growing our seedlings in these plug trays, and they're just naturally inoculated with these worms. So when we take those seedlings and we transplant them to our towers, the towers are just naturally inoculated with eggs and with the worms just through those plugs. Occasionally when we get in a new batch of towers that need to be cycled, this is the hardest part of the system. Any aquaponic system is cycling it up. We'll take red worms, we can just add them directly to the tops of the towers so long as they're being irrigated. Now when the towers are first getting started, a lot of the time I think the worms probably just crawl right through and get in the system solution, but that's not a bad deal either. They will clog some of your emitters, but those worms will just flow with the system. It's aerobic enough that they won't die, they won't drown, they'll just kind of float right through the system, and they'll squirt right back into the tops of the towers typically. So we have red worms in all of our towers, all through our system, and they do a great job at keeping our percolation rates very fast. They do a great job at reducing our solids and making a lot of our organic solids, converting those into plant available nutrients. So I highly recommend the use of red worms with towers, especially in aquaponic systems. Any kind of media-based aquaponic system, red worms are going to be a huge asset to your system. They're going to increase your nutrient availability, and they're just kind of another fun little element. Biodiversity in these systems equates with better resiliency, better system stability. So I encourage it, and they're just pretty cool little animals too. So that's how we get red worms in our system.
The media that they put in the towers is like a sponge, a real open sponge type. And when he talked about plugging the little plants in, there's a little spot in the media, this stuff that you can buy, that they put the dirt and the plant in, and then they slip it down in that tube so the plant's sticking out in the little hole. It is really cool. I can hardly wait to try it. Anyway, I had to share that with you. Gotta go. We're gonna bugger the bankers, the politicians and bureaucrats on every level of fighting back. Thanks, guys. Share this with each other. Share this with your family, friends, and we'll talk to you on Thursday. I'm not live streaming tomorrow. I apologize. But Thursday we'll be back with exactly people winning in their foreclosures and keeping their homes and what they've learned and how we might be able to do that ourselves. Thanks a lot for watching.
When I was a lass, I was proud of me class, like my father and mother before me.
They taught me to fight for my civil rights,
But it's always the same old story.
the rich reign supreme while the poor can but dream.
Under Labour or Liberal or Tory. And I say, bugger the bankers and politicians, bugger the bureaucrats too. Bugger the buggers who make up the rules, and if you're one of them, bugger you. And if you're one of them, bugger you.
The system is bent and the money's all spent. We're measured from every direction.
The workers get taxed while the wealthy relax, with nary a moment's reflection.
Where there's brass, there's muck.
And they don't give an arse, 'cause they're programmed against insurrection. And I say, bugger the bankers and politicians, bugger the bureaucrats too. Bugger the buggers who make up the rules, and if you're one of them, bugger you. And if you're one of them, bugger you.
Now all you good people with passion to vent, don't give up the struggle for justice. For I've done my time on the protesters' line, and these days I show my dissent.